Everybody, so we are back in the garage. As you can see, the white Kia EV is behind me, and judging by the fact that the hood is open and the front end is jacked up, you can guess that there's a problem. So what happened? The gearbox exploded. Again, this is the second time that I know of that this gearbox has gone on this car. So let's just dive into it. I'll show you what happened. I'll show you what it looks like. So I got it out, it's on the bench. Let's take a look. So the gearbox is here. I already took it apart. And so it seems like it's the same failure as the first time. This differential is cracked. That large gear there is all chewed up. There's shrapnel everywhere. So the bottom ones, obviously got chewed up after this one got chewed up, and there's metal filings everywhere, and the metal, obviously the pan got soaked. There's filings everywhere. So this was another catastrophic failure for this thing. So how did it happen? Well, I'll tell you what the last few months has been like, and then I think I have some thoughts on what the issue is. So, only like, 4 or 5 videos ago, I put this thing in. So chronologically, that was about a year ago, right? So around December of last year, I did this repair. I got this transmission, this gearbox from a great guy, a friend on Facebook, from the EV Lovers group. So this was a transmission that was on his car. His car had some noise issues, so the dealer took it out and replaced it, but the noise persisted, so it was somewhere else in his car. But they gave him the transmission, said if you want it, you can just hold on to it. So that was this one, and he did tell me he actually took it apart and replaced some of the bearings. So and everything else seemed okay with it. So he sealed it up, shipped it to me. Basically, I filled it in, filled with oil, installed it, which is the last video. So that's where we were, right? From that point, car was great. Car ran smoothly. There was no issues, and for about 6-7 months, everything was great. It was optimal. At around the 6-7 month mark, I started hearing some noise from the front end. So obviously, it could not have been the gearbox. So it must have been something else. So then I started thinking about, okay, well, let's look at the first owner. So what he told me was, when I bought this car, the dealer quoted him for a gearbox and drive shafts and a whole bunch of other stuff. But basically it was gearbox and drive shafts. So when I did this, I didn't do the drive shafts. They felt good to me, right? And there wasn't any bearing noise, and there wasn't any shake or anything. So I just put the car back together, and it was fine. As I said, fine for 6 months, 6 or 7 months. So then the noise started. Okay, so I started thinking, well, maybe the front bearings, because it was 210,000 kilometers, maybe that's what the issue was. So I lifted up a wheel, and sure enough, I shook it, and there was a little bit of plane there. So I figured, okay, let's do the front bearings, right? So I did the front bearings, and then there was still the shake was there, still there. So I looked at it, and it seemed like it's coming from the rack. So the rack has got some sort of, I think there's like a ball joint or something on the rack that you can replace. So anyway, it looks like that's what the issue is on this, right? And so I did that, and then the problem persisted. Then I started noticing some vibration on the highway. So when you're trying to figure out where the vibration is coming from, if you feel it in the steering wheel, that's coming from the front end. If you feel it in your butt, then that's coming from the back end. So what I felt was vibration in the butt, but when I decelerated, the vibration moved to the front. So it's moving, right? So what's going on? I don't know, right? So then I thought, okay, maybe the tires, because the tires were the original tires, maybe they're starting to, maybe something happened, they're losing balance. So then it was winter time, so I figured, okay, why don't I change it to my winters? I know my winters are good. So I put the winters on there, and it felt a little bit better, but basically the same issue, right? So vibration on deceleration. So I just kind of kept the car I could find the right speed where I just kind of put a little bit of pressure on there, and everything was working fine. So I drove like that for a while. So then I figured, okay, maybe it's drive shafts. So then I started looking into drive shafts. Of course, drive shafts, you can't get them third party. They're $1,000 each from the dealer. So, so now what? So I don't know what I was going to do. I thought, okay, well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll just not put any more money in this car. I'll drive the car into the ground because they're not worth anything, right? Just drive the car to the ground. If I can get another year out of it, fine. Because I've done that before with front-wheel drive cars. I didn't have a problem, right? Right. I drove front-wheel drive cars into the ground, and there's no issue. So now what? So driving the car, vibrations slowly getting worse, and then about a week ago, I started hearing a grinding, not a grinding noise, like a rubbing noise. Something is rubbing, right? And so then that's a problem. Obviously, that's bad. So and then after a couple days, I threw a battery code. Some random battery code popped up. Okay, and so then I Googled it, and one guy told me it's a transmission issue. Okay, so how? But anyways, all right. So and then Friday hit, and I took the car, I dropped the kid off, and it exponentially started getting worse. So then I started hearing the driving. I'm thinking, crap, let me just get home, and that will be the end of this car. So I was just limping home. The grinding started getting worse. And then I had to do an emergency stop, so I jammed on the brakes, and then pow, something gave, and that was it. It was only about 600 meters from the house, so I had to get a tow home, right? So given all that information, I had a chat with my friend in BC, and I think I have some ideas. So let's go back to this transmission, and we'll see. I'll let you know what I think happened. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing that popped into mind, which is drive shaft. Okay, because the same thing happened to the same car, so it's possible there's an issue with the car, and if you don't fix that issue, the problem returns. Right? So drive shafts. So here's the drive shaft, and it's actually okay. I don't feel any issues. Obviously, it's not stiff like it's new, but it's not wobbly. It doesn't have an issue. I can't feel anything like that. So my first thought is, okay, it's drive shaft because wheel bearings are new, gearbox is rebuilt, gotta be drive shafts. So then I talked to the dealer, right? So I asked him, when you do a gearbox replacement, do you always change the drive shafts? And he said he's never replaced a drive shaft before. He said once when he did a gearbox, it was noticeably bad. So he changed it. But that's it. So this is not noticeably bad. So I can't say that that's what the issue is. So I don't think it's drive shaft. So is it defective part, right? Is it the gearbox which is defective? So we do know that it's a weak spot on the Gen 1s, but is the gearbox itself, has it been superseded? And so the answer is yes, the part has been superseded on Gen 1s, but also apparently on later years Gen 1, like 2017 or 18 and up, it's actually a different gearbox. So it's possible that they've changed the design. As I said, I've taken front-wheel drive cars and I've destroyed them. And I've never had a gearbox or a transmission explode before like this, right? So either the American designs are better or something is wrong with this design. So, and I talked to another guy who's had his gearbox replaced twice under warranty. So a warranty replacement, right? So maybe, okay, because I monkey around with with spare parts. So maybe it's spare parts, but I don't think it's spare parts. It's possible that the gearbox design has an issue. Okay, so let's take a look at this gearbox itself. So what is the issue? Is it a design flaw, right? So as you can see here, there's actually 6 bearings, right? So there's one here. This is for the parking brake idler, and this is for the main input shaft. right? And this is for the output shaft, right? So 1, 2, 3 times 2, 6. But this one doesn't do anything, so you don't replace this one. Usually you just replace these two, right? So let's talk about the forces that you see on this gearbox, right? This is coming from the motor. So the motor doesn't move, motor stationary. So this type of gear, this type of bearing is what they call an idler bearing, right? Because there's no lateral forces, right? They're just basically rolling forces on this one. So that's the bearing that they put on this one, right? And then of course there's a reduction here at the bottom, which connects to this. This is the one which will have lateral forces, right? So the drive shafts come in on each side and connect to this one here, and this one could have lateral forces, right? So what they do is they put this, race and cone style bearing on this one, and then it's put into the case, and the whole case is sandwiched together, right? So there is no type of set screw that you set the tension on the bearing. The tension on this bearing is essentially this whole case, right? So when it buttons together, then there's tension on this bearing, and that's how they do it. So maybe that's the problem, right? And maybe, the American ones are done a little bit differently. So you don't put that direct stress on this, because you can see the whole design. I mean, so what's your pressure on the bearing? I don't know. What if these are cheap bearings? What if the dealer puts, generic bearings and the tolerance is not precise? And so there you have a little bit of play, and over time, that's what the issue is, right? So this one itself, my friend from Facebook said he rebuilt this. So I figured that was what the issue was. But after talking to him, what he actually did is he only replaced this idler bearing, right? This main output shaft bearing, he didn't replace. So that's the original bearing, right? And that's the one that went. So I'm gonna guess that the proper way to do it is to replace all 4 bearings and put a brand name one for that one, right? Because the tension, these are helical gears, right? There's no play here, right? Any play will cause permanent damage, which is what has been happening, right? So the correct way to do it is to, even if you get a used unit, if you somehow manage to find a used gearbox, right, then take it apart and replace the bearings, right? This is the most important one, right? This one to me, I mean, I don't know, because, under pressure, it's a different story than it is. I don't see any damage to the cone, to the race. But I'm just trying to imagine what the issue is, right? So when you do have one of these, replace the bearings. Now, the next problem here is this is destroyed. So now what, right? Now what? Indeed. So now what? Well, according to a website online, and I'll put a link in there, those gears do exist. And they exist in these transmissions. So this is an A6 GF1 transmission that they put in Kias and Hyundais. And let me shut this light off here. So I got this one from Facebook as a used transmission. I paid $300 for this transmission, and my understanding is if you take this apart, inside here are the gears that you need. So the plan is to take this apart and try and replace those gears, right? I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but so you might say, well, why don't I just get a used one? Yeah, find a used one of these. They don't exist because everybody and their grandmother has already bought it. So by the time these things are all off of warranty, they just won't exist. Right? So you won't find a used one. If you could find, I don't know, maybe the 2017s are better, but do they still fit? Who knows? So the plan is to fix what I got, and I am going to start taking apart that transmission and see if I can find a suitable replacement for this thing. Okay, so it looks like the differential itself is shared with these transmissions, but the tooth count on this ring and pinion are different, right? But I took a quick look online. It looks like people do sell these ring and pinions. So in the off chance that I can just buy the ring and pinion, and of course that the rest of these gears aren't messed up, which I need to examine, then I could probably just do that. And of course, assuming I can press out these things. So let's see what the tooth count is for these things. Okay, so to get this pulley off here, I mean, I don't think, so it depends on how this is built. Like, I believe that this part is cast with a shaft and the center sprocket and the outside, because you can see it's kind of like balanced, right? So this is a bearing, right? And this is a bearing. So, right, this is pressed on this side. So I can only assume that this thing is pressed down on this side, right? But because there's no key or anything, then, you know, this thing has to be a compression fit, right? So there's no way you're getting this off with like a bearing puller, a bearing splitter. So the only thing I can do is cut this off here, and hopefully this thing pops off, right? Because I do have a line on another set of gears, right, with a demolished shaft, but the gear is good. So I would need to pull the gear off that one and then put it on this one. So I can't damage this thing, but I got to get this off, right? And so if this thing's actually cast with this, then obviously, you know, this whole part is ruined, and that's it, and I'm giving up. So everything depends on me getting this thing off. So let me saw it, and hopefully it pops off. So I tried heating this thing up. I tried chiseling it. I tried slicing off that thing. And this piece here, I mean, I sliced this off, and it just won't chip off, right? And this thing is just, there's just no gap at the bottom, right? So I don't know if this thing is cast
or if it's just basically pressed on with like a 100-ton press, what? But this piece should have chipped off, because I put a chisel on that, and I pounded the Christ out of that, and it just doesn't chip off. So I just don't think that there's a seam here. I think this whole thing is cast, right? So this, and all this is all cast, right? This is a bearing, this is a bearing. So they cast all this, and they press this on, and then they press the top bearing on. And that's how they make this part.
So Facebook has come through once again. This is a set of gears for this gearbox, given to me by another Facebook friend. So who has the same car. So he had the same car, but his failure was different. He had an input shaft bearing failure, and that broke that bearing and then split the case apart. And I think that it didn't have time to kill the gears. So he went ahead and sent me the input shaft, actually the differential and the input shaft gear, which have the gears that I need. And it looked to me like it was salvageable. So let's take a look and see if this saves my bacon yet again. Okay, this looks good. Different. The old one is thinner. His must have been from a newer. This must be the superseded one. So this gear width looks to me like it's the same as the transmission gear width. Anyways, the teeth count is the same. I don't know if it fits. Man. Okay. So now we know that the superseded gearbox is different, which means that Kia knows that there's a problem. So instead of giving it to me for free, it's $3,100. A little chipped, but the gears are intact. So this is my old one. The input drive shaft gear is the same, looks like it, and the
And this drive gear, no, it's different. So the old gear is pushed up higher. This one here, okay. All right, well, let's see. It won't fit, but anyways, maybe it'll fit. So basic update here is, I'm still playing with this thing. So this is a 10 bolt gear. This is an 8 bolt. So this will not fit on that one because that one and this one are the same. So the only way to make this work is if I swap these shafts, and I think this housing comes apart obviously, or else how would they make it? So I think you can take this out, you can press these things out, and I could probably repair this thing, right? So at least that one's working, because we do know that if we just shave this a little bit, then that will fit, right? So the next problem is this. So the question was, this doesn't, this is the new one, this one doesn't fit the old one. But, and I thought about this, after removing this top bearing, it looks to me like this is pressed in. And it has some teeth. So they pressed it in and it scores the shaft. So this is pressed into this. So I could take this one out and put my old one back on here, and that's a solution. Next problem is this. So I thought this was easy to take off, and it looks like it actually did wreck the shaft, but part of the shaft. So I'm going to see what I can do. But more importantly, notice that there's a different shaft width. So this is the original is a fat shaft, and this is a thinner shaft, right? So this is the bearing that came off of here, and this is the bearing that came off of here, and I think it's the same thing to here, right? And that actually solves another mystery, because on that sheet where this guy is repairing this gearbox and he says, oh yeah, order 2 bearings, he obviously wasn't talking about this. So that guy wasn't repairing this earlier version of the gearbox. He was repairing the later version of the gearbox. That's why both these bearings were the same on him. I mean, he still got the numbers wrong, but he's right on the fact that those bearings are the same, right? The last problem is, of course, different heights. That shaft is a different height than this one. But I don't know how different they are, right? Like, how different are they? You know, it looks to me, they're pretty different. So unless I can extend this shaft, right? Maybe cut a part of this shaft off and weld it. But I'm just looking at this now, and oh my goodness, the width of this is a lot thicker. The original is a lot thicker than this one. Yeah, I don't. Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I can even hack this thing. Anyway, it just looks like this one's thicker, but the diameter is probably the same from here to here. So the question is, can I somehow extend this shaft? If I can, then basically I can put this thing together. Unless, like, there's no way I can. I can't do anything with this thing. Okay, so I removed the gears, the main gears from this using the press, and sure enough, there are some teeth there, so you can, I guess, press this on, whatever. The problem is that this shaft and this shaft are not the same size, so my old gear is not gonna fit. So that's it. That's officially it. I can't use these parts to repair the transmission, which is a shame because this car is just waiting for it to be installed. So, but I'm not spending another. So it's $3,100 the dealer wants for this transmission, right? So after tax is going to be $4,000. So I'm not spending $4,000 to fix this thing, because even if I did, is there a guarantee that it's going to work? Right? It seems like these are a failure point. So how many more years am I going to get out of this? Right? So that's the main issue. I just don't trust this car. I don't trust anything about this car. Anything that goes wrong with this car is a write-off. Right? Transmission goes, is a write-off. Battery goes, it's a write-off. Any one of those computers under the hood goes off. It's a write-off. So the bottom line is with these used EVs, so now that I've had it for 1 year only, I can confidently say don't buy a used EV. Certainly not a Kia. I don't know if Tesla's any better, but I don't imagine. I mean, why would it be any different? It's the same issues, right, with the car, same basic issues. So, is it worth it? No, a used car is not worth it. Maybe a new car is worth it, but quite honestly, let's take a look at the numbers. So I bought this car for 5, I put another 6 into it, so I'm 11 grand into this car. I drove it for 1 year. So if whatever I can salvage, let's just say I get a couple grand from this. So, 10,000, let's say $10,000. So it cost me $10,000 a year. I could have leased a Ferrari and had more fun, right? How much money did I save? About $1,000. So knock that off. So we're down to $9,000. So how is that different than any other regular car, right? You can't get parts for them, right? And Kia doesn't make the used part prices attractive. They're so expensive. So clearly Kia is not intending for this car to be on the road anytime really passes warranty, right? They don't want to see these cars again, right? Any recall, this has so many recalls, every time it comes back, Kia loses money. So I can see why Kia would jack up the used part prices, right? Because it makes maintenance preventative, right? You don't want to do it. So these are going to be classics one day. They are garbage, right? After you're done, they're garbage. They go back into the landfill. So, I don't know, make that calculation if you think you're saving the planet, right? Anyways, and buying a new EV, it still has the same problem. It has range problems. Okay, you got a bigger battery, so your range gets a little bit bigger, but it's the same basic idea, right? You don't trust the range, right? And if you run out of range, you're not going to wait for 2, 3, 4 hours for the car to recharge at a gas station. Come on, it's ridiculous. So I am not a fan of EVs. I will never buy one again. I wouldn't recommend any of my friends to buy one. Certainly not buy a used one. And a new one, I realize I'm a little bit upset, but quite honestly, if you were to buy a new EV, you're spending more, right? So to save the money on the gas. So how long will it take you to, if you're burning $2,000 a year, you don't drive very much, how many years are you going to take so you can say that you've made a profit, right? It's not going to happen. Buy a good quality used car, knock 20 grand off the price, and there's your savings. There you go. You just saved all the money that you need, right? So that's the bottom line. And that's everything I got to say about EVs.
So I am going to pick up all the parts. I'm going to throw them in the trunk. I'm going to put the car back on the ground. I'm going to secure the motor. I'm going to roll it onto the driveway, and there it will sit until somebody wants to pick it up. Now, the battery is almost new, so that is what I thought I was getting when I bought the car. That I could always get my money back with the battery, but the battery pulled the code, right? There's now a code on the car, and it's related to that last recall that the dealer did on this car. And they were like, yeah, we'll fix it, just drive it in. Yeah, I'll drive in the car. Right? So, and now this battery is tied to this VIN. So if anybody else takes a battery, they're going to get the same battery code. Now, is the dealer going to honor that battery if it doesn't belong to the car? I don't think so. I wouldn't. So the car's worthless. What's it worth? I don't know, scrap. Right? So $10,000 for 1 year of driving, and the previous owner bought it for 20. He had drove for a year and a half, neglected it, didn't put a penny into it. So he spent, $15,000 in a year and a half. So he also spent $10,000 a year on this car. So is that worth it? I don't think so. I don't think so. So that's it. I'm gonna wrap this up. Hopefully someone buys this, and that's it. And that's the end of the EV. If it gets past the snow, that will be it. And that will be it for EVs for me. And good night, everybody.